So we are going to finish up the house on Mango Street today. The next chapter is Linoleum Roses, and we find out right away that Sally has gotten married. She met a marshmallow salesman at a school bazaar, and she married him in another state where it's legal to get married before 8th grade. So I immediately wonder about this. I mean, when I think about some of these earlier chapters, it seemed like Esperanza was maybe already in high school or was about to start high school. But it seems like maybe she was still in 8th grade, about to start high school, because literally she was assaulted. Sally was with her at the carnival, hooking up with other people and ignoring her. And now all of a sudden she's married to a salesman, and she married before 8th grade. So this gives us a little bit more of an anchor, I think, in terms of this timing. It definitely seems like it's very much middle school still. And I think it's really important to notice here that her husband sometimes gets angry, and once he broke the door where his foot went through, though most days he's okay. So this is also just a universal truth. It is true that people who come from abusive households often marry people who are abusive. So they repeat that cycle, and this is what Sally is doing. So she is even more trapped than other women on Mango Street. Her husband doesn't let her talk on the telephone. He doesn't even let her look out the window. And he doesn't like her friends, so nobody gets to visit her unless he is working. So she sits at home, literally trapped, and has to sneak around to see people when he's at work. She's afraid to go outside without his permission, which tells me that he probably punishes her. He probably abuses her if she does something he doesn't want her to do. She looks at all the things they own. So, of course, this is something else that the young women are after, which is financial security, because they're all poor and they have all these things. So this is supposed to make her feel better, but it doesn't. She likes looking at the walls, at how neatly their corners meet. The linoleum roses on the floor, the ceiling smooth as wedding cake. So at least the house is solid, which of course that's not the case for the homes on Mango Street. They're all sort of crooked and falling apart. But this clearly is not enough. And I just wrote, this is the worst possible result for Sally, unfortunately. The next chapter is The Three Sisters. This is another coming of age moment for Esperanza, where she, for the first time, sees a dead person. And so it's August, and Lucy and Rachel's sister has died, the baby sister. So remember, Lucy and Rachel were her first friends on Mango Street. One night, a dog cried, and the next day, a yellow bird flew in through the open window. Before the week was over, the baby's fever was worse. Then Jesus came and took the baby with him far away. That's what their mother said. So it seems like these little things that are happening in nature are seen as omens for something dangerous is going to happen to the baby. Notice here we have this rhyming again. They came in with the wind that blows in August, then as a spider web and barely noticed. So it's sort of a gentle rhyme here. It's not exactly a rhyme, but it's very close. And we have another simile, the aunts, the three sisters, one with laughter like tin, and one with eyes of a cat, and one with hands like porcelain. So these are the three sisters, the aunts, who come for the baby funeral. And Esperanza notices that all kinds of people come into the house to see the casket, the little thumb of a human, and a box like candy. And it's really anybody who's nosy, who wants to see inside their house, which is kind of gross. And I think Esperanza is old enough to recognize that that's not really the reason to go to a visitation. Esperanza had never seen dead before, not for real, not in someone's living room for people to kiss and bless and light a candle for, not in a house. It seems strange. They must have known, the sisters. They had the power and could sense what was what. They said, "Come here," and gave me a stick of gum. So this chapter is a little bit of like superstition, sort of supernatural beliefs. This is, I wouldn't say it's going as far as magical realism, but certainly Esperanza, I mean, she went to a fortune teller. You know, we just saw a reference to omens about the baby possibly having the death being foretold by what's happening in nature. So there's a little element of the supernatural here. So they call her over and they tell her she has a good name. Now, this is the opposite of what Esperanza has been told before. Remember, her mother said she was born on an evil day and that she was bad because of how she made fun of Aunt Lupe. Also remember that Esperanza always thought her name was ugly. Well, now she's being told her name is a good name. And they say that she's special. They recognize her as special, that she'll go very far. They say to her, make a wish, what do you want? I think we can imagine she's hoping for a home of her own that's not on Mango Street. I'm sure we can guess that wish. But finally, she's getting a good fortune. You know, these ladies are telling her future, basically. She'll go very far, which is not at all what the fortune teller told her a couple years ago. She told her she would have a house of love, but not like a good house. And so they go on and they say to her, when you leave, you must remember always to come back. So this is the third time someone has given Esperanza advice about her future. Remember, Aunt Lupe told her to keep writing. Remember, her mother told her to stay in school. They say to her, when you leave, you must remember to come back for the others. A circle, understand? You will always be Esperanza. You will always be Mango Street. You can't erase what you know. You can't forget who you are. So this is so important. This gives me goosebumps too. I love some of this writing. This is true for everybody. You know, everybody wants to make their own future. They want to define what their life will be, but you can't erase the past. Of course, this is a line from the end of The Great Gatsby. This is also an idea in Beloved. This idea that you carry with you the history of your people. This is the case for her too. It was as if she could read my mind, as if she knew what I had wished for, and I felt ashamed for having made such a selfish wish. But of course, it's not selfish, as long as she remembers where she came from. You know, for the ones who cannot leave as easily as you, they tell her, will you remember? And she says yes, and she's confused because she's still a young girl. But of course, she will remember. She will go on and become a writer. I can predict this because so much of this reminds me of Sandra Cisneros. And she will remember her people. Because remember, Sandra Cisneros said that when she went to the University of Iowa, everything was about writing for yourself, when in fact, she feels like the Hispanic writing community really is writing for their people. And she's doing that too with this book. So I think this is really important to notice. This is the kind of thing that will be on a quiz. It's also the kind of thing that could be used as evidence in a paper about, what is the theme of this book? It's about making a better life for yourself, getting away from poverty and abuse, and using an education and using your talents to make a better life, but you can't turn your back on your past. And so that's what the message is there. Then we have Alicia and Esperanza talking on the steps. Now, Alicia was someone who came up pretty early in the book. She was the girl whose mother died and who has the responsibility of taking care of her father, but she's also going to the university and trying to get an education so that she can have a better life. So Alicia is definitely a positive influence in Esperanza's life. She reminds Esperanza that there is a way, there is a way off of Mango Street. We can predict that Alicia probably is also going to find a way, hopefully, out of Mango Street. She says she likes Alicia because she once gave her a leather purse with the word Guadalajara stitched on it. So this could be a quiz question. It's also, I think, somewhat symbolic, which is home for Alicia. And one day she will go back there. This is what Alicia believes. She will go to college. She will go back to Guadalajara. But today she is listening to my sadness because I don't have a house. So again, Esperanza does not identify with her home. Alicia says, you live right there at 4006 Mango. And Esperanza says, no, this is not my house. As if ignoring the house could undo the year I've lived here. So it's just like a year in time. I don't belong. I don't ever want to come from here. So this is her conflict. And I made a note here. This is an inner conflict. People are telling her, you have to remember where you came from. But she doesn't want to come from here. So this is something that she's going to have to reconcile over time. You have a home, Alicia, and one day you'll go there to a town you remember. But me, I never had a house, not even a photograph, only one I dream of. So Alicia has two homes. She has where she lives on Mango Street, and she also has Guadalajara, and Esperanza only has Mango Street. So this is what's causing her all this angst. And Alicia just tells her, matter of fact, like it or not, you are Mango Street. And one day you'll come back too. So we have now a fourth person telling her, you can't forget where you come from. You are your personal history. You are the people who came before you. And Esperanza is resisting. She's like, no, not until somebody makes it better. Who's going to do it? The mayor? No, not the mayor. No one's going to make it better. So this begs the question, could someday Esperanza make it better? Could programs, education, a helping hand make it better? Perhaps. So again, we have this message that she can never escape where she came from, and she should not try to escape where she came from. Then we have a very short little vignette, a house of my own. Of course, this is what she wants. She does not want a man's house. She does not want a daddy's house. She wants her own house and not an apartment in the back of the building. She wants a porch and a pillow and purple petunias, her books and her stories, her shoes by the bed, nobody that she has to bother with, no one's garbage to pick up after, only a house quiet as snow, a space for myself to go, clean as paper before the poem. So this in itself is a poem. Remember, Sandra Cisneros began as a poet. So anytime I see these very, overt sort of poetic phrases, I think about her as a poet and that this is like her soul a little bit here. This last chapter, Esperanza says, I like to tell stories. I tell them inside my head. I tell them after the mailman says, here's your mail. Here's your mail, he said. So here's what she's describing. You may have heard, there was like a trend a few years back about imagine yourself as the main character and that this is how you manifest your future and this is how you empower yourself. That's kind of what she's doing here. She's imagining as she goes through her life that it's a story somebody is reading. Here's your mail. I make a story for my life. For each step my brown shoes take, I say, and here's how she imagines narrating her life. And so she trudged up the wooden stairs, her sad brown shoes taking her to the house she never liked. I like to tell stories. I'm going to tell you a story about a girl who didn't want to belong. So she's writing a story, a little mini story about what we just read in that chapter about Alicia and her sitting on the steps. We didn't always live on Mango Street. Before that, we lived on Loomis on the 3rd floor. And before that, we lived on Keeler. Before Keeler, it was Paulina. But what I remember most is Mango Street. Sad red house, the house I belong but do not belong to. I put it down on paper and then the ghost does not ache so much. So the ghost, what is the ghost? This desire for a different home, the fact that it's just like not a happy spot for her. This is an interesting phrase. You could talk about this for 30 minutes, honestly. I write it down and Mango says goodbye sometimes. She does not hold me with both arms. She sets me free. So what she's saying here is that as she writes stories about herself, about other people, which is, of course, what this whole book is, she sees herself being able to leave, and that Mango Street releases her and lets her go. One day I will pack my bag of books and paper. One day I will say goodbye to Mango. I am too strong for her to keep me here forever. So she personifies Mango as a woman who's trying to hold her back. And she says, but I am stronger. I will go away. Friends and neighbors will say, what happened to that Esperanza? Where did she go with all those books and paper? Why did she march so far away? They will not know I have gone away to come back for the ones I left behind, for the ones who cannot out. Who cannot out. It's such a beautiful phrase. So she has some resolution. She will come back. Look how quickly she accepts this. By writing, she can envision her future and she can accept her history. She's manifesting, she's imagining that she can leave, and knowing that she can leave helps her to be willing to go back. I think she has to imagine first that she can leave. So we're going to do a quick review here of some important aspects of the story that I think could end up being part of a paper or a close analytical read or maybe a short answer on a test. It's these women, these other women that are important in this book. And what's challenging about this book is that these characters pop in and out of these vignettes, and it's easy to forget where you read about them. I think the most important characters who influence Esperanza are Marin, Sally, Minerva, and Alicia. And I wrote here where you can find information about them. So Marin shows up in chapters 10, 11, and 26. And just to remind you, she's Puerto Rican. She's the one who is living with her in-laws, like her aunts and uncles, and she sells Avon makeup. She stands outside their door at night with makeup on, batting her eyelashes at men, hoping that someone will marry her. She, imagines working in the city and having like nice clothes, and she's sure a man is going to come and give her a better life. And she's the one also who witnesses the hit and run. She's the one who's dancing on a Saturday night with a guy named Geraldo who doesn't have a last name, who nobody knows, and she sees him get hit by a car, and she faces that terrible reality that nobody will know that he died. Sally, I would say she's the most influential in terms of Esperanza's own coming of age. She is a closer friend to Esperanza. She's abused by her father. Remember that she moved into Esperanza's house for a very short time in order to be safe from her father. She is a mentor to Esperanza. She kind of like tells her about sex and guys and like how to do her makeup, and so she sort of mentors her, and they do things together socially. One of these chapters is the monkey garden one, where she goes off with guys and Esperanza is disgusted by what she's doing. She's also the one who abandons Esperanza at the carnival because she's hooking up with guys, and Esperanza ends up getting sexually assaulted, and then she marries an abusive man. So she's an example of someone who breaks Esperanza's heart because she's not necessarily a very consistent friend. She's also someone who teaches Esperanza by example of all the things that Esperanza does not want to be. She's a very good example of what not to do. And so a lot of the most coming of age moments occur with Sally. Minerva, she's the one, she's only in chapter 33, but I included her because she also writes as a way to escape the pain of her life. Now, she is trapped, unlike Esperanza. She's in a marriage already, and she has children. And my recollection, too, is that her husband is hardly ever around. And so she's writing poems, and she and Esperanza share their writing with each other. So she is like an intellectual companion in that way. And then finally, we also talked about Alicia just a moment ago in these last few vignettes. She's in chapter 14 and 22. She pursues an education despite being trapped by her role as a woman. So this is really important to know that that she's able to have that power to find an education for herself. I'm also thinking I may have missed one of those chapters because Alicia is also in this last one. So let me just check. I'm going to show you all this again too, just to remind you. But you can see I'm numbering all these chapters. Alicia is also in chapter 44. So let me make sure I write that down because you need to know that as well. Okay, so let's just go back to the beginning for a minute. I just want to remind you, I was writing down all the different characters as they came up, just so I could remember who they are. And you can see that I've taken 4 of those and written more about them in the back because they're a little bit more important in my mind than the others. And then we also have Sally and Minerva on this page. And then also notice that I numbered all of these vignettes, which I recommend you do too. It's how you can go back and review if you want to read or, just read a small section again for a paper or something, or if you want to go back and review any more of these videos. It's how I'm basically marking these videos is by the vignette chapter numbers. I hope you enjoyed this book. I do think it has universal appeal to any kind of a reader. I think every single one of us can think of people who have influenced us as we were growing up in positive and negative ways, giving us examples of what we do want to be like and people who we don't want to be like, and also helping us dream big, which I think is a big message in this story.